The Association of Chartered Physiotherapists in Respiratory Care podcast. Today, we will be concerned with the topic of simulation-based education within respiratory physiotherapy training. And this follows the recent publication in the ACPRC journal of 3 distinct papers which were discussing simulation as a topic. Today, I'm joined by 3 wonderful colleagues who are going to help us unpick this topic. So let me introduce you first to our panel. Our first panel member is Stephanie Mansell. Stephanie is a consultant physiotherapist at the Royal Free Hospital in North London, where she specialises in acute and long-term respiratory care in the sleep and ventilation field. Steph was an early adopter of simulation-based education and was the AHP lead for simulation at the Royal Free between the years 2015 and 2022. Steph has developed and delivered several simulation courses within the respiratory field, both for physiotherapists and across the MDT. And Steph has led the recent ACPRC publications on simulation, which have included a scoping review, a commentary, and a position statement. They're the papers that we're going to be discussing today. Our second panel member is Amy Bendall. Amy is a senior lecturer in the School of Healthcare Sciences, Cardiff University, and is the current professional accountability lead for physiotherapy for that program. She teaches across undergraduate and postgraduate modules and delivers education to both home and international students, predominantly in the topic area of cardiorespiratory care, but also in professional practice. Amy has embraced simulation-based education to support students in developing their competence and confidence in providing cardiorespiratory physiotherapy care, and she's used a variety of simulation techniques and tools for this. Most notably, she's been involved in a collaborative project with the Cardiff University Learning and Teaching Academy as part of the university's Virtual Hospital Showcase project. And finally, we have Abby Greenwell with us. Abby has been working as a physiotherapist at the Royal Free Hospital for the past 9 years, and she currently works in the liver transplant team, but originally trained in cardiorespiratory physiotherapy, so she has a very strong foundation for her clinical practice. In the past 3 years, Abby has served as the AHP simulation lead for the Trust and has been developing multidisciplinary team and profession-specific courses to enhance learning around human factors and crisis resource management competency. Abby is passionate about using simulation as an effective teaching modality and has played a key role in establishing in situ MDT simulation on the ward and creating an AHP MDT simulation day as part of the SPACE program, which is a preceptor follow-on looking at Band 5 stepping up into Band 6 roles. In addition, Abby continues to deliver annual on-call simulation sessions, aiming to improve the confidence and competence of the respiratory on-call and weekend staff. So I'm going to start our discussion today by asking you, Steph, why simulation-based education was chosen as a focus for the ACPRC editorial board recently.
Thanks, Mandy. That's a really great question. And I bet lots of people are wondering how on earth we choose our topics. I just wanted to remind people about what the role of the editorial board is within the ACPRC. And our aim is to provide direction for guidance documents, which are either developed by or in association with the ACPRC. And the way that we go about producing these documents is usually with a scoping review, which seeks to find the existing evidence, guidance, or other documents on a topic. Once we've completed that scoping review, we discuss what types of documents might be useful for ACPRC members. And so far, the editorial board has had lots of different types of outputs. And those have included the scoping reviews, but also position statements, commentaries, and more recently, some technical standards. But we don't work in isolation. So we also aim to work collaboratively with other organisations like the British Thoracic Society and the Intensive Care Society to produce guidance and resources that are really relevant to respiratory physio. And so the way that this particular topic came about was every year the ACPRC puts out a call to members asking for proposals for topics. And then we review all of those topics in the context of ACPRC priorities with our expert knowledge on what's upcoming, and also considering what access we've got to the necessary people to produce the best outputs. So SIM was proposed by some ACPRC members, and we were aware it's been a really hot topic with increasing healthcare professionals delivering SIM. And we wanted to make sure that we provided resources for respiratory physio so that they can deliver really high quality and safe simulation. And I really hope we've achieved that with the resources that we've produced.
Thanks, Steph. That's a great background to both the editorial board function and as well as why simulation-based education was the topic of these three outputs. Amy, I wonder if I could ask you if you might be able to give us an overview for our listeners regarding the outcome of the simulation-based education within respiratory physiotherapy training scoping review, and perhaps just outline for us what key points a reader could take away from that review.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So in the scoping review, the focus was to look at how effective simulation-based education is as a pedagogical approach, and looking at it from both pre-registration and also post-registration respiratory physiotherapy. So perhaps it would just be worthwhile just perhaps give me an outline in terms of the methodology that we use for this. So we reviewed literature from 2014 to 2022, and it covered 9 databases. And after we'd gone through various screening approaches within that, we were able to include 25 studies in the scoping review. And these covered various educational levels. So we had pre-registration, postgrad, and also some interprofessional learning studies within our scoping review. And in terms of kind of some of the key messages and kind of take homes from this, what we found is there was a real noticeable increase in the amount of research on simulation-based education in respiratory physio, reflecting its rising kind of adoption across the professional group. What was really noticeable is that there was a real heterogeneity within the studies, and that was noticeable in terms of both the modalities that were used, outcome measures that were used, and also the different types of modalities. So if we just maybe think about that, there are examples of using part task trainers, simulated patients, and high fidelity mannequins. What was really nice to see across the literature is that the studies, or the literature, covered both acute care and also chronic respiratory conditions. I think some of the other kind of take homes, or perhaps recommendations from the scoping review, things like gamification, virtual augmented reality, and also 360 degrees were not included as modalities with any of the studies. And so these as potential emerging modalities was something that the scoping review mentioned. The other thing was to do with the outcome measures. So a lot of them focused on learner satisfaction, confidence, and perceived competence and self-efficacy, rather than perhaps objective clinical outcomes and impact on patient safety. So there are a number of areas that were recommended, or perhaps areas of gaps in the literature. And something that, was emphasised was the need or emphasis on interprofessional education and postgraduate settings, as a lot of the research was covered within the pre-registration contexts.
Thanks, Amy. That's a fantastic answer to the content of the scoping review. And we noticed that this very comprehensive review was complemented by the commentary paper that explored simulation-based education in pre- and post-registration physiotherapy. Amy, can I ask you why a commentary paper was necessary, and how does it add value to the scoping review, but also add value to our membership?
Yeah, thank you, of course. So the commentary paper followed on from the scoping review. We knew the scoping review showed that the application of simulation-based education in cardiorespiratory physio was not standardised. And what the commentary paper aimed to do was contextualise simulation-based education within the specific needs of our specialty. And in doing so, it also offered expert insights from experienced professionals, drawing on the research that we included within the scoping review, but also adding in policy and practice. I think in terms of what it adds to the value for the membership, perhaps many educators and clinicians may be quite unfamiliar with how to design, implement and evaluate simulation activities effectively. So the commentary provides that kind of overview and that foundational knowledge and practical considerations. So for example, it provides information on learning theories, some of the things to consider with faculty development, and also outcome measures that can be used to evaluate simulation-based education. The other thing that's really nice within this is members can gain a really clear, concise overview, and that's obviously really accessible to our members, but also as the journal is open access, and they're able to access all of our articles that we've done. There's benefit outside of the membership also for that. And I think the other thing that the commentary adds to the membership is that it promotes a shared understanding and dialogue among our members, but also the wider simulation community about the role of simulation in advancing the profession.
That's fantastic, Amy. Thank you for that explanation. I think I'd like to ask Abby, as a practicing clinician, what did you find was the most valuable, and perhaps what was the most surprising aspect of the commentary paper from your perspective?
Thanks, Mandy. Yeah, I think the most valuable section for me is the training recommendations. We already have some in-house training, which, along with the e-learning for health modules, are really good for faculty new to SIM. But we haven't really considered advanced courses or any refresher courses. So this is something I really want to follow up on, look into further. And also the recommendation of faculty members being mentored by more experienced facilitators. We definitely have lots of experienced members who do support new faculty, but I think putting some structures in place to ensure all new faculty have a specific mentor would be helpful. And I think then the recommendation that most surprised me was for us to strive to deliver this training as interprofessional rather than uni-professional. I've been involved in running several courses which are multidisciplinary, and I can definitely see the benefits. Often someone from another profession will bring something up during a debrief, which is quite a different reflection or crisis resource management competency that I hadn't considered in preparation. And so the value added is huge. But for on-call physio sim, as the learning outcomes have always been quite specific to situations faced by those staff members, I wasn't sure really who or how we could incorporate other professions, but something for me really to think more on.
Thank you, Abby. So just to summarise, you've really taken away some points that you can reflect upon, as well as points that can help to shape and improve the programs that you run as a result of that paper. And thank you for sharing that with us. I think that was really interesting. The final output from this series of papers was the publication of the ACPRC position statement regarding the use of SIM-based education for both pre- and postgraduate respiratory physio. Steph, I wonder if I could ask you to provide an overview of that position statement and perhaps to inform our listeners what ASPE stands for and what the ASPE standards are, because ASPE is mentioned frequently within the position statement, and we probably just need to help our listeners understand what that actually means.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. So the position statement was based on the scoping review, and the position statement with the best practice points are evidence-based. So it's not just us as a group of experts making it up. We have made sure that those are really evidence-based and informed. And there's 3 key sections to the position statement. So the first section gives them best practice points about the actual delivery of simulation. And it highlights that SIM is most impactful when it's delivered in a multi-professional way. But we do recognise that there is still a place for uni-professional SIM too. So a little bit of what Abby was alluding to, I think as a group, we were probably quite surprised to see the strength of evidence for multi-professional SIM, although that's been the way that more experienced faculty have been shifting for quite some time. And it was really important for us that this section links with the ASPE standards. So we were really clear that we wanted to avoid any duplication or reinventing the wheel. So ASPE stands for the Association of Simulated Practice in Healthcare, and they're a multi-professional special interest group in the field of simulation. So they're kind of like the ACPRC equivalent of simulation, if you like. They're based in the UK. They run regular journal clubs. They've got subgroups of particular special interests. So they've got a particular group for their technicians, for example. They've run sessions on moulage, and they have a big annual conference as well. And they released their most recent standards in 2023. So that was the 2nd edition of the standards. And I would encourage all of our listeners to review these before they embark on delivering any SIM. But they're also a really great tool for self-assessing the quality of the SIM that you're providing. And we'll put a link, they're referenced in the position statement, but we'll make sure there's some links to these documents added in the show notes as well. So then coming back to our position statement, the next section was around recommendations for faculty training and development. And some listeners might be wondering what on earth faculty is, because it's quite a specific term that we use in simulation, but we use it for our educators. So in the context of SIM, faculty are the people delivering the courses. And we advocate for both basic, advanced and refresher faculty training. And we've given some minimum standards of training that should be delivered for the faculty. So there should be training on adult learning theories, scenario design, and then both the pre-brief and the debrief. So the pre-brief is really important in ensuring the psychological safety of our learners. And then the last section that we cover is on outcome measures and assessment. So for those of you particularly working in the pre-registration field, you can use SIM for formal assessment, but what's really important is that the psychological safety of the learners is paramount to that way that you could conduct that. We should try and match our outcome measures with our learning objectives of the simulation, but we also need to acknowledge that sometimes there might be benefits from SIM that we don't anticipate as faculty when we're designing the courses, and therefore they're not captured with the learning outcome measures that we use. And as Amy was talking about a bit earlier, when she was talking about the scoping review, there is a wealth of data that measures satisfaction of physiotherapists in regards to SIM, but we need a lot more research that investigates the impact on patient safety and outcomes, as well as system-wide. And it might be that the reason that we haven't been able to do that is the outcome measures that we have don't fit that role. And so we might need to develop some and create some specific to the respiratory physio profession. So if you're looking for research projects, there's definitely tons of opportunity within SIM.
Thanks very much, Steph. Sounds like you might have some postdoctoral work to do in that area. And thanks for that insight into the position paper. Amy, I'd like to come back to you, and as a physiotherapy educator or a faculty member working with the pre-registration students, can you give our listeners an example of how you have or how you might integrate the best practice points outlined in the position statement into your teaching practice?
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. So I think what the document's been really useful to do is remind us all of the importance of having an awareness and working knowledge of the ASFI standards, but also the local guidance. So for me, working in Wales, it would be the HIW or Wales guidance, but also we've got the CSP simulation toolkit for pre-reg physio education and training. The other thing, as Steph was talking about, was faculty training. So it's about, you know, supporting people that are looking to perhaps start simulation, and the position statement has been a really useful document to signpost people to kind of start them off and within that. The need for us to grow, but also develop people that are gaining and have experience in SIM has been really important. And I've also taken away the importance of building in mentoring as well. Something that position statements really guided me and those that I work with is the need to make sure that you're giving enough time to prepare and plan. So the position statement talks and provides a lot of direction around simulation sessions, you know, making sure, as Steph mentioned, you know, in terms of learning outcomes, you're really thinking about the right type of sim that you want to do. So thinking about equipment, location, the type of attendees you have. But we've also looked for ways that perhaps we can, within, you know, map things across our curricula. So using them both within perhaps our BSc program, but also our MSc pre-reg, and looking to see where resources can be shared and ideas can be developed that may support more than one learning experience or one group of particular students at a certain level. Steph mentioned psychological safety, and that's been a big thing that I've taken away, and you know, make sure that we integrate fully within that. So some of the practical things might be around establishing ground rules and clarifying roles, emphasizing that SIM is a really safe space for learning. We haven't used it yet for assessment, but that's another thing that, you know, in the future we may want to explore. And then the debrief, and I think, you know, there's lots of information in the position statement that guides towards that debrief, the use of tools and approaches to facilitate that, and then being able to link back to the outcomes for the session, and in doing so then maintaining and promoting that safe space for learning.
That's very insightful, Amy, that you know, the position statement is, you know, obviously very helpful even in the pre-registration setting where there are experienced educators applying simulation-based education alongside traditional learning. I'm interested as well to ask Abby what has been the impact of the position statement on your teaching practice, because you are teaching post-registration physiotherapists. And I wonder if perhaps you could share an example where you may have implemented one of these best practice points.
Thanks, Mandy. I think firstly, just actually having some best practice points, which are really specific to respiratory physio simulation, has been so valuable. It's really, I guess, validated that we are getting lots of things right, or at least striving to get lots of things right by having, you know, clear learning outcomes, trying to deliver it in a non-discriminatory and inclusive manner, and having, you know, a good pre-brief. And that's great, but it's also highlighted areas for development and a standard against which we can then review our sim programs against, which we haven't really had before. And then I guess in terms of implementing a best practice point, having those clear learning outcomes is so important. And when we are starting to plan a sim program, we meet as faculty each year before for our yearly on-call and weekend respiratory update. And we discuss the current learning outcomes we want to achieve through that year's simulation program, and then build the scenarios and debriefs around that. We find that throughout the year, the themes tend to make themselves known as to what people are struggling with or encountering often during their on-calls and weekend working. And so it's really helpful to keep track of those. But yeah, having some really clear guidance on those learning outcomes at the start before you even begin thinking about scenarios is so helpful.
So, Abby, to summarise, I think what you're saying is the position statement gives you the ground rules for developing and improving, developing, maintaining, but also improving programs that you may have in existence or want to develop. So I think that's really positive. So I'm going to ask my last question to Steph, because through our panel today, we've identified quite a lot of issues that have arisen from the 3 published outputs. And so I'm wondering if you might be able to help our listeners to understand what future directions our educators and our clinicians could be working towards in the SIM-based education space.
Thanks, Mandy. Yeah, so as you said in that lovely introduction that you gave to the panel, I was an early adopter of SIM and have championed it across a number of different settings. And it's been really wonderful over recent years to see more allied health professions in general gaining access to SIM. I think as we see more and more pressure on our pre-registration placements, we're going to see more and more use of SIM in our pre-registration world. And I really hope that we can continue to expand our offerings so that we're delivering courses in a multi-professional way as possible. I think personally, based on the work that we've conducted on behalf of the ACPRC, I really hope that people will take that goal to make courses as multi-professional as possible forward. There's definitely a place for uni professional SIM, but the impact is just so much more powerful when it's delivered in a multi-professional manner. I really hope that the scoping review and the commentary and position statement give people the tools to ensure that we're delivering really high quality SIM and that it's delivered in a safe way. I think those that are new to SIM can sometimes think it's easy to do. And in fact, if we don't train our faculty adequately, it can be quite unsafe and also ineffective, especially if it's not delivered in the right way. I don't want to put people off, but I do want to make sure that we're safe. I think we also need to recognise that SIM isn't a cheap educational intervention. It's resource intensive in terms of equipment and space and the number of faculty that we need to deliver a safe and effective course. So we really need to make sure that we're making the best use of the resources. And the best way to do that is to have really trained and skilled faculty to do that. I think lastly, we definitely need more evidence for the impact of SIM, and I really hope that the sections that we've provided on outcome measures in the commentary and the position statement really give people the tools and motivation to conduct some further high quality research in the space. And although it was me leading on all of these outputs, I did have a wonderful team that were helping me, and I'd really like to just take this opportunity on the podcast to thank all of them. So we had Emily Barnfield, Gabriella Cork, Georgina Eckersley, Agnieszka Levko, and Una Jones. And then I was really delighted that Mandy was happy to host this podcast, and really grateful to Amy for joining to give her insights. And it's been really wonderful that we've had Abby joining us as somebody external to the authorship to provide some additional insights. Lastly, I really want to make a special mention to Kate Grafton, who was one of the authors on these outputs. She was awarded an ACPRC Outstanding Contribution to Respiratory Physiotherapy at this year's conference, and in part that was for some of the work that she did on this, on the SIM work. So I just really hope that everyone finds the SIM documents useful, and if you're making use of them, we'd really love to hear how you're getting on with them. So please do get in touch with us through the ACPRC and let us know how you're finding them.
Thank you very much, Steph. So we're close to being out of time now. Thanks so much to the panel, Steph, Amy and Abby, for the fascinating insights that you've shared with us today. We're going to sign off, but we'd like to recommend to our listeners to access the simulation articles that we've been talking about today from the Journal of the ACPRC. And if you're interested in developing your skills in this area, look out for the next ACPRC Sim faculty training at a venue near you in 2025. Bye for now.